Since 9/11 and the War on Terror, it's been used as a justification to increase the collaboration and information sharing between federal, local law enforcement agencies and international agencies. So now when you're speaking to your local police officer, the information you're sharing with that police officer is going to be shared with an FBI agent. The information shared with the FBI agent can and will be shared with international law agencies. This is a direct result of something called the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which in local neighborhoods looks like fusion centers. And in the Bay Area is the Domain Awareness Center, for instance. So there's been a direct change, a material change in the ways in which information is shared, but also now there's material shifts in the weapons and the different technologies that are used by these agencies where they're all sharing the same equipment. So that's why you see police carrying military grade and military style equipment and weaponry. That's a direct result of the shifts after 9/11 and the War on Terror, which is essentially a way to make it a boundless war with boundless victims and boundless enemies, to make the United States that much more powerful, and its collaboration with other repressive governments like the State of Israel that much more powerful in maintaining social control. So surveillance is used as a tool to control populations. It's a tool of social control. And law enforcement essentially are those who put that in practice. So they work hand in hand. You cannot separate out surveillance technology from law enforcement practices and agencies. At the end of the day, it's a reciprocal relationship, and in fact, law enforcement necessitates surveillance technology. That's why at Urban Shield specifically, the Weapons Expo includes numerous surveillance technologies. All and mostly, many of them are actually produced by the State of Israel, because the State of Israel is the largest producer of surveillance technology, which should come as at no surprise given Israel's role in repression both against Palestinian people but also globally. So at Urban Shield, they're selling weapon technology and surveillance technology, all used by different security forces and law enforcement agencies. There is actually no distinction that you can make between the two. It's law enforcement that's placing cameras at corner stores. It's law enforcement that's gaining that information and data. It's law enforcement that's able to target particular types of people as a result of gaining that information that is provided for them through things like the Joint Terrorism Task Force or the Domain Awareness Center, or even things like See Something, Say Something, where everyday individuals now are their own walking surveillance technologies. So now you have everyday individuals who are acting as an arm of police, an arm of state violence. And this is part and parcel of the architecture of surveillance, as Stop LAPD Spying likes to call it, where now we have such a complex system of repression that involves every aspect of society and technology that's infiltrated in every neighborhood by every agency, where it's almost impossible to decipher where one ends and where the other begins. But at the end of the day, we do know for a fact that law enforcement not only benefits from surveillance, it necessitates surveillance. The face of racial profiling happens to be the Arab or the Muslim within the context of the war on terror, quote unquote. We know that really the face of the enemy are all those who are unwanted, all the undesirables by the state, all those who challenge state violence. So that includes activists and organizers. It includes people that are now political prisoners, right? But it also includes the poor people, the most vulnerable, who are in need of what they call public safety, but are actually the targets of these programs, which are intended to further isolate and marginalize these same communities. The problem is the notion and the mentality of militarization, the mentality of policing in this country and everywhere. And that's what really we have to challenge, is that mentality and the normalization of it in our local neighborhoods and the programs that play it out. So by challenging Urban Shield, it's one way to really challenge militarization and state violence broadly, to weaken its impact, to weaken its reach, and to make it clear that there's a community response to these types of programs. Because if we stay silent and allow these things to happen in our backyard and be used as a model for the country, then we are actually complicit in these types of practices. And we need to make sure that we resist it in every way, shape, and form, and get ourselves involved in ways that can actually challenge militarization and make it less possible for these types of repressive tactics to play out in our everyday lives. Urban Shield provides us an opportunity to really bridge and connect the dots between all different types of state violence, different types of repression, the impacts on various communities, and the ways in which surveillance specifically too, because there's such an increased level of concern by the public today around surveillance. And there needs to be an equal outcry against militarization and policing, because they work hand in hand. Again, you cannot separate out surveillance from policing and surveillance from militarization and militarization from policing. And Urban Shield is the epitome of that. It actually is the illustration of how all those things work together to work with international agencies and international security forces from places like Israel, the Philippines, Haiti, and connecting and applying some of those tactics that are learned that are used against some of the most vulnerable populations and occupied people all across the world right here in our own backyards. So we know from Urban Shield that there's resistance and there's a lot of critical dialogue and discussion happening in neighborhoods about the role of surveillance and militarization. And on the other side of it, there's increased and deepened investment in maintaining these types of programs, both in order to gain funding and profit, but also to exchange information and technology and tactics to further repress and really expand the reach and power of police.